welcome and thank you for coming this evening to this speaker series, next installment. Very excited to have you here with us this evening. My name is Cynthia Cutting from the Museum of the White Mountains, and I'm here tonight with the new titled Rebecca Enman, who is now the Museum of the White Mountains Assistant Director. So everybody, clap.
Congratulations.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Well deserved. So really glad she's here with us this evening to make it all work. And first of all, I need to do a couple of thank yous. Thank you to those of you who are our museum members. We're so grateful to your support and your continuing support. It really makes us feel great doing the work, and it makes it all possible. So thank you for being our members. If you're not a member yet, please do consider joining us. We'd love to have you in the group. Museum members are able to contribute ideas and feedback to our work and help us to continue to involve the museum forward. So we'd love to have you in the group. Thank you to our Museum of the White Mountains Advisory Council. There are a couple of advisors here with us this evening, I've seen, including Wayne Thornborough is with us, and Adam Apt is here, and he is the curator for Wayfinding Maps of the White Mountains, our current exhibit, which I hope most of you have been to see. And if you haven't, please come and take a look. It's a great exhibit, a really wonderful experience. So thank you to advisors. Thank you to Adam to being our fantastic co-curator for the exhibit. And a big thank you to New Hampshire Humanities for giving us the, awarding us the grant that funds this entire speaker series this summer. Without it, we would not be able to do it. And we're really, really grateful to be able to gather together people in this wonderful setting from all over the place this summer. It's been wonderful, really enjoyed it. Tonight is a special, and I need to add one more thank you with this evening. As you may know, for many of our exhibitions, we have a lot of partners, a lot of people that help make it happen, who bring content and collaborate with us to have a really rich experience. And one of those frequent partners is the Squam Lakes Natural Science Center. So tonight's talk is really a product of that partnership, and we're really, really glad to have SLNSC with us. And I just totally flubbed that. Thank you, Eric.
That's okay. That's okay.
And to introduce Eric, who is the naturalist at the Science Center. And he has been there for quite a while, and he has a real passion for communicating the natural experience to the people who visit the center and to school groups and all kinds of people that need that, well, that profit from that experience. And Eric has also been an educator in a lot of different settings for over 30 years. So this is comes naturally to him. He has a BS in biology from SUNY at Geneseo. And he is also an artist, if you didn't know that. He's a wildlife photographer, and he is a maker of wooden spoons. So I can't wait to see examples of those sometime. So really, really pleased to have Eric with us this evening. Thank you for being here, Eric, and welcome. Are you ready to take it away?
I sure am. Thank you so much, first off, to Cynthia and the Museum of the White Mountains for inviting us to spend some time with you this evening. For those of you who may not be familiar with the Squam Lakes Natural Science Center, we're a nonprofit organization located in the Lakes region here of New Hampshire. Our mission is to advance understanding of ecology by exploring New Hampshire's natural world. So we meet this mission through our live animal exhibit trail, educational programming, and our lake cruises. And I'm happy to say, and we're starting to branch out in other ways as well. So I am going to try to share my screen and start. So bear with me if you will.
And Eric, while you're doing that, I'm going to do the thing I always forget to do. Please remember, everybody, as we go through Eric's talk, add your questions to the chat, questions and comments, and Rebecca will give those to Eric at the end of the presentation so we can ask those questions. So sorry, Eric, go ahead.
That's okay. So Rebecca, we got a green screen, right? No notes. Good. All right, so to start off, what I want to do is We've been talking a lot about maps, and I want you to think about that for a moment, because for some people, maps bring certain things to their mind. They definitely do for me. For me, it's, you know, exploration. And some people it might be for discovery or intrigue. Another group of people might be interested in, you know, finding their way, planning a route from one location to another. And then for some people, maps are a sense of trepidation. They don't feel comfortable with them. And a map can actually tell you a lot about a location. Sometimes, however, there is an empty space. And you can find them even in our maps today. And you're wondering, wait a minute, you know, what's happening there? There's some information that's not known. And it may be the fact that you're missing something, or maybe there's some information that can't be expressed in this format. So if you participated in any of the previous presentations, you may have noticed that there's kind of a common theme that runs through all these, and that's an attempt to describe the White Mountain region here. So whether you're using LiDAR, a three-dimensional map, a topographic map, maybe you're using narratives. So from hikers or from explorers or from an indigenous culture. Each one of these provides a different layer to the amount of information that we know. However, there's kind of a second thread that weaves its way through all these presentations, and that's going back to these empty spaces. These unknown places, either because people hadn't discovered them or hadn't traversed them yet, or, as I had mentioned before, gaps in our information about that area. And in a way, we're missing the story. We're not getting the full story. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to try to provide an additional perspective. And for this evening, what I want to try to do is fill in some of those empty spaces, some of those gaps that we've got in our understanding of the region. So tonight, let's focus on one location, the Squam Lakes Natural Science Center property. And I want to show you how wildlife sightings in the local landscape, maps, and technology are going to intersect to provide what we're calling hidden stories. So to give you an idea, for tonight, I want to give you an overview of the project. And I want to focus on some of the tools that we've used, but then I want to spend a lot of time going over the maps, the stories, and the results of what we've discovered with just one species. And then I also do want to mention some of the other parts of the project, because this is a three-part project here. So the Hidden Stories project is basically a project that uses trail cameras to identify local wildlife and the natural communities that they use, and then share our results with the public. So the initial questions that we posed were basically to learn what animal species are present on the property. Does it change with the seasons? Does it change over a number of years? What natural communities are they utilizing? And does this change because of human activity? Either timber harvesting we're doing right at that time or after the fact when that forest is regrowing. So this is a three-part project. The first part basically included the initial setup of our cameras, and then collecting this information and creating what we call a story map that we have online to share our initial findings. And this is something that we update yearly. Part 2 is an exhibit that we've constructed on site to share our findings with visitors that come to the Science Center itself. And they're interactive displays that people can go into it as deep a depth as they want to. And then our third part is actually something we're still in the process of working on. And this is an educational programming component that we'll be using with school groups. Particularly, we're aiming for upper elementary school into middle high school, junior high school. So the project actually began about 5 years ago. There were 6 trail cameras that were placed out on the property. It was randomly determined. This kind of goes back to my initial curiosity. I would be doing programs, particularly during the winter, where I'd be taking school groups out, or I'd be taking member groups out, and we'd be looking at animal tracks. And of course, being the person that I am, I want to go follow them, and I want to go off all over into the woods. And that wasn't necessarily something that I could do. So I really wanted to know what was here on the property, because everybody would say, well, I'm not seeing anything, just a couple of tracks. And I knew that there was a lot more there. So I expressed my concern and somewhat my frustration to a volunteer who happened to have 6 trail cameras that he wasn't using. So he lent them to us. And basically what we did was we put them out at hotspots where we knew there were tracks that we had seen in the winter. And we had also determined certain areas to say, well, we're right here at the edge of 2 different natural communities. Let's see what happens. The only issue that we had was we realized very quickly that we needed to have more thought in the placement of our cameras and in their dispersal. So that's where our mapping started to come in. So the first thing that we needed to do was we needed to map out our property and know exactly what we're dealing with. So I am very lucky to have a volunteer who is an ArcGIS professional who helps me with ArcGIS programming. And so we started off literally by just tracing the property line and then using a GPS, handheld GPS unit to walk our trails and place them on the map in the right location. Then we ended up using overhead aerial photos. And for me, I literally traced out the different natural communities. So the dark green here would represent conifer stands with probably some deciduous trees mixed into it. The light green was all deciduous trees. The yellow would be the fields. And then the blue areas would be streams, ponds, and wet areas. Laid on top of that, I needed to figure out how are we going to break up the property into segments where we can put out these cameras. And so what we did was we ended up putting out 28 cameras on 210 acres. So each one of these is a 10-acre plot. So some cameras have more than, some plots have more than one camera in it. This area here, there's a camera at the pond, and then there's also 2 cameras in a field location here. And then other areas have only 1 camera. You'll also notice that they're color-coded, and that's because I have volunteers who are, they're basically the backbone of this project, because they go out every 2 weeks and they collect cards from their zone. So you have a yellow zone, a brown zone, a green zone, a red zone, and a different colored green zone. And so they're responsible for going out they take their camera cards, change them out, and bring them back into me for analysis and uploading onto the database. So just to get to this point, maps have been tremendously important to us. Video, still images can tell one story. Maps can tell a second story. But when you combine them together, I find you get the best of both worlds. And it's really kind of neat to actually see both of those perspectives. So our outdoor technology tools, pretty straightforward. Trail camera, GPS unit, and you still got to go low tech. Light and rain notebook. So this is where my volunteers will write down the status of the batteries, what cameras what camera cards they've changed out, what the numbers are, and then noticing any problems with the cameras themselves. Is a date off? Is there a problem with the camera draining batteries very quickly? That's a note for me as I read through it to say, this is something that I need to go back and check on to make sure it's working properly. I already alluded to some of this earlier, but for our technology tools inside, we use a variety of different computer programs. Again, I am very lucky to have a volunteer who is a computer programmer who has made a custom-made database for us that allows us to enter the data and then generate reports. Basically, all I have to do is say, John, this is what I would like to generate as far as a report is concerned. And usually before I have an opportunity to even consider how I'm going to use it in the next week, he's probably given me a draft form a few days later. Also, the ArcGIS program that I had mentioned earlier, a volunteer is very important in helping me with that. I'm still heavily involved in that, but with their help, that frees me up to do a lot of the editing with the video and still photo image editing software. And then there's another program over here called Intuiface that we utilize for our exhibit on site. This does nothing more than just give you a brief overview of the actual timeline for the project so that really you can see that there have been a lot of people that have been involved in this process, from our grant writer to initially placing out cameras with a couple of people. Also for the exhibit design, there was a number of our facility staff as well as our education staff and our marketing staff that participated in that. Same with the story map. And then of course, our volunteers. And then as I mentioned earlier, we actually are working with another person outside of the organization to help us in developing our education program. So now let's get to the fun stuff. So what have we found? Our marketing person creates a quick snapshot. She calls it a by the numbers sheet every year for us. And it gives people just a really brief overview of, okay, so what's happened? So there's 28 trail cameras out on the property, 210 acres. That really hasn't changed too much over the last few years. But what's interesting is if you look at the fact that we've got 10 volunteers who donate over 187 hours just last year. That's with COVID. And that's with me doing all the camera work from February to early May. And they are still generating this huge amount of time. So without them, really, to service these cameras and get this information would be very difficult. Roughly, the cameras have made a total of 5,300 sightings. 51 species were cited last year. If you look over the history of the project, there are 15, almost close to 16,000 sightings by the project, or by the cameras for the project duration. And there's been over 73 species that we found. Now, when I say sightings, you need to understand that sometimes for the camera, they're taking multiple images per sighting. So that's why we have over 27,000 images and video clips for just 2020. And for the whole project from 2016, there's 126,000 images and video. And I have the pleasure and also sometimes the frustration of going through all of those images and video. But for me, it's kind of like Christmas. Every time a camera card comes in, it's like, what's next that I'm gonna find? So our final thing on this information sheet is just our most cited species for 2020. And you can see, okay, chipmunk, mouse, red squirrel, you're gonna expect that because those are prey species. They're gonna be seen more often. But then our coyote and white-tailed deer. Our least cited species, we've got a very long list for that because each one of those species has only been seen for the year once. And then we have graphs, maps, videos, and still images. So let's actually start going into that with just one animal species. Let's just focus on the black bear. The project itself highlights 4 species. So black bear, white-tailed deer, red fox, and coyote. So each of these species, we take all the information, and every month I'm basically creating information that can be used at the end of the year to create a map for each month, to create graphs, and then also to edit video footage and edit still images. Other wildlife that we get on our cameras, we'll still put that into the database. We'll still go ahead and put everything in there, but we're not going to construct graphs and maps for 73 species. That's just more time than we have available. So we're just using those 4 species kind of as our keystone species, so to speak. And then the other thing that we'll do is we will do editing of still images and videos for those other species. So let's just go and take a look at what we've seen for the black bear. So the first thing, this is a graph that summarizes the average monthly sightings by the cameras
January, February.
From 2017 to 2020. Each year is going to have a slightly different shape to this graph, but you're going to see generally the fact that you're going to have a high point from basically May until September, October, and then you're going to have little to no activity January to March and November to December. If I asked each one of you why you thought that would be, I think with the natural history information you know about black bear, you'd be able to answer that fairly straightforward and say, well, that's because they're in their winter den during that time frame. And you'd be right. But what's interesting to see is that the fluctuations when you look at 2020 compared to 2019, compared to 2018, there's some variations where instead of having a peak, let's say in September, the peak is in August or it's in October, and it tends to shift, which is why, you know, if you look at it from an average, you get a better overview of what's happening year to year. So let's look at the same idea, but now let's look at it for a 24-hour time frame. So what we're doing is we're taking all the sightings that occur in a year, 365 days, and we're determining what time of day did it occur. 1 o'clock in the morning, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, 7 o'clock in the morning, what time? And then we're doing this over 3 years and taking all those averages and putting them together. And so, again, if you look, you're going to say, oh, well, if I really wanted to see a black bear, chances are the best time for me to be out would be at 6 o'clock in the morning on a September day. That doesn't mean that every day at 6 o'clock in the morning in September, there are black bear out there. It just means you have the best chance of that happening. But the other thing that you'll notice is that there are also some other high points, somewhere here for an average around 9 o'clock, and then somewhere in the neighborhood of around 3, 4, even to about 6 o'clock, and then it drops off. So for some people, you know, they may think, yeah, well, this is pretty obvious, but look at the activity that you see in the middle of the day. It drops, but it's still there. And I just was spending part of my day today actually going through for 2017, 18, 19, and 20. I was going through each month for the hourly graph to see how that panned out in comparison with this overall average. And there are some there's some months where it does not follow this pattern. And it's, again, seasonality is going to be a factor here. Okay, so here's where we're going to need to make a slight adjustment. So bear with me for a minute. I need to stop sharing this and I need to share something else because let's just see, maybe. Nope. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to share a different screen here for me. So bear with me, if you will, for just a moment. Okay, so I want to share that screen. What I want to show you is a 3-year compilation on the map that shows you black bear sightings by the trail camera. I'm going to go through this several times. This is only the 2nd year. That light blue square basically is meaning that at least one sighting of a black bear occurred at that location in 1 month. There may have been more, but at least one occurred there. And the thing that you'll notice is that there seems to be a pattern. You can actually see the fact that, okay, they're not present on the property. It's one thing to see it in a graph, but then to start seeing it on the map, it has a different context to it. The final thing you're going to notice is that some of these right here, look at how many different areas for the month of September that black bear was sighted. I shouldn't say that black bear. Black bear have been sighted because we have mothers, we have cubs, we have yearlings, and occasionally we have a male that's on this property. But the other thing that I want you to notice is as we go further along here, watch in 2020, this is going to be our last year. Watch what happens in the winter. Right there, January. You all hear about a black bear coming out in a January thaw. When there's a warm spell, it was a real treat for me when I found it happening, and I actually saw the video and it was literally, running right past it. It's like, oh my gosh, this is not supposed to happen. So it's kind of neat, things that again, in March that we just passed. But again, you can see there's more sightings by the camera. That does not mean, please don't make the mistake of thinking that they only show up in the blue spots. It just means the black bear may have gone to some of these other areas and didn't walk past the camera. but it does still give us an idea, particularly as we go further into the year, that, yeah, they're a lot more active at some times of the year than at other times of the year. So now let's compare that to a coyote. So you get everyone who got the screen, right? Okay, so let's take a look at the coyote. You're noticing fluctuation occurring as far as sightings, just like they did for the bear, but there's some differences. So the first thing you probably should notice is the fact that the coyote is being seen during the winter. Well, that makes sense. The bear's in its den during the winter. It's also found, at least for some years, it was found in a number of areas throughout the summer. But let's go into the next year. And compare the number of sightings of these animals by the cameras compared to the black bear at that same time of year. It's different. And so, of course, the question in my mind is, why? There is an article that was put out by UNH that they had done out west that was saying that when a black bear is active in an area, coyote are not. And the question is okay, does that occur here? Well, if you used last year, 1 year's data, that would be the case. But if you use another year's data, it might not be the case, because September, October usually is, and autumn is usually, August is usually a time where you see a lot of it. And yet we're finding a lot of coyote in the same area. So it really is almost more like more questions than you have answers for. So let me bring you back to where I was, and we'll share that screen. And I want to share that. And you should now have another graph in front of you. And this has basically taken sightings by the cameras and broken it up by natural communities. I need to put an asterisk here, because yes, field is a natural community, pond is a natural community, but forest, I've taken the forest community and broken it up even more so that we have a deciduous forest without logging trails or streams at that camera sighting, coniferous forest without logging trail or streams at that location, mixed forest without logging trails and streams at that location, and rocky slopes that are within a forest. And then I broke out forest with logging trails that are current or that were used, and forests that have a stream, as well as vernal pools. And here's what kind of floored me. I didn't expect the black bear to be using a vernal pool. I expected it to be using the ponds. And it's just the other way around. If you're using either the 2020 data in blue or the average 2018 to 2020, you're seeing that it basically follows a similar pattern. These animals are sighted by the cameras more often by the stream, logging trails, and vernal pools than just about any other natural community. The only thing that comes close is a field. It doesn't mean these other areas aren't used, but it may be more seasonal. So, some of the same areas, vernal pools, here's one. Here's the other. November, July. Same rock. You've got probably 2.5, 3 feet of water here at its deepest, frozen, of course, completely dry. And yet the animal is coming back to that area. So you're going to have them coming back to natural communities, as well as this image here and this image here are about the same time of year. So they may be using different natural communities at the same time of year. So for our video, a change of season is going to impact the forest and the other natural communities, but it's going to impact the bear. So I can show you a camera on a map showing a blue square to say a black bear was here. But does it tell you the story of what it was doing? No, it doesn't. Does it tell you that the cubs were there with it? No. Does it tell you that the cubs are kind of roughhousing around here while mom's ripping apart logs, feeding on insect larvae? No, it doesn't. So here's where I feel like this is a much richer story when you can combine those maps and see that distribution, and then you can go in a little bit deeper and say, oh, well, what are they actually doing? And I'm taking a look at my time. I'm going to, unfortunately, give you, I think, a little bit fewer of my videos than I want to, but this is one I have to. So remember the vernal pool? The black bear uses them to cool off. So a day like today, I had joked around with a number of you that we should be doing this program sitting in the lake, but I don't think I'd want to be using this vernal pool all filled with mud as a way to cool off. But this is what's happening. And vernal pools are used by black bear like this. I've got footage from this 2 months earlier where there's a lot more water. And then there's another vernal pool where a black bear is actually swimming in late March, early April, in the one that we saw with the rock. So the water's full. It's like 3.5, 4 feet. I love to swim. You can ask my wife. Water is where I love it. But I think I draw the line at April, March temperatures of water, because that's just really a little too cold. But obviously, for the bear, this is one of the reasons why they use it. Now, let me see if I can bring you to one of the other ones that I wanted to show you. I think it's this one. Yeah. Okay, watch how strong this bear is. So that's a 36-inch, roughly, piece of rock that's about 14 inches wide. That bear just flipped it over very easily, looking for insect larvae or something else, thinking that, okay, maybe there's something edible here. I went up to check on this camera a week after that black bear. I saw the footage because I needed to check on a date for the camera. And I looked at the rock and I could move it, but not without probably hurting my back. So these are really, really strong animals. And if I can, again, please bear with me for a moment. I have to find this one because black bear, nope, wrong one, is F. That's the one I need. Black bear are curious. They investigate cameras and they damage them and reposition them. But I can't be too mad at them because, believe it or not, for a black bear, not at this location here, but a similar location, a black bear rearranged the camera, and I picked up my only footage of a redback bull at night because the black bear had redone this footage, and I had gotten a hermit thrush that otherwise I wouldn't have seen because of the black bear. So again, you know, this is something that's really, it's really exciting about this process and this project. So let me then stop sharing there, and I need to share over on this screen and bring you back there. And I need to go to here. Whoops. Or not, we'll just skim through quickly. So one of the things that a lot of people want to know is where can I learn more? What can I do to find out more about this? This is kind of cool. So there's two options that you have. You can either go online to our YouTube page. All you have to do is type in Squam Lakes Natural Science Center YouTube, and that will bring you to the homepage. And then if you click up here where it says playlists, you have two choices. You can choose something called New Hampshire Nature, which is a project that I had worked on during COVID. And then you can choose Hidden Stories. And Hidden Stories will give you a video. There's I think there's 14 up there right now. 3 of them are summaries of the year. And they basically are 4 to 5 minute videos that have taken some of those video clips and kind of combined them together to give you an overview of what we've seen on the property or what we've seen at just the vernal pool, or last year it was just the stream. Then there are also small, shorter video clips that are about 15 to 20, 30 seconds that show something of an animal's behavior or an animal we found, trying to ask people, can you identify it? Or what is this animal doing? And what we do is we provide a short amount of natural history information. We don't give you the answer. If you really want to find the answer, when you're looking at the screen itself, for YouTube, underneath is the text of what's being said by the naturalist, and your answer is down there. And then the other thing that you could do if you want is you could go to the Hidden Stories homepage for the Squam Lakes Natural Science Center. So again, if you have a search engine that you're typing into, you're just going to type in Squam Lakes Natural Science Center Hidden Stories, and that will take you to this page. If you click on this orange button, that will actually take you to the story map. And that will give you a very thorough description of the project, the natural communities that we're putting cameras in, graphs of what animals, the 4 species, how they're found in that natural community for the last year, maps for each of the 4 species, as well as graphs just to those 4 species, some links to certain videos, and still images as well. If you still can't get enough of that, you can come to the Science Center, and you can have a lot of fun looking at our Hidden Stories exhibit. The 2 panels here, this is the 4 species that we're highlighting: the red fox, white-tailed deer, coyote, and black bear. Each has an interactive kiosk. So you can choose, if you look here where our executive director, Ian McLeod, there's a bunch of different images here that you can choose maps, you can choose videos, you can choose graphs, you can choose still images, and then it's basically nested, so you can go in as deep as you want or as shallow as you want. This part of the exhibit here, this gives you just a general idea of how we use the technology for creating the exhibit. And then this kiosk that's right over here, this is a kiosk that has all the other species that are not highlighted. So it's just a video to things like moose and fisher and hermit thrush, long-tailed weasel, possum, whatever, that you can find there. And then this last thing is a visual. If you're looking at this image here, it shows you that ArcGIS stacks images, one on top of another. For those of us of a certain age, I put myself into this category. Do you remember the old Encyclopedia Britannica and building the human body? And you peel back the skin and you look at the muscle layer, you pull that back and you look at the digestive layer, and then you pull back to the nervous system, and then to the skeletal system. And then you kind of build them back together. Well, this is basically taking those different layers and adding one on top of another to create the map that we had seen, that is the natural communities, and then the plots on top of that. So there's a new way of looking at things, and what I would encourage all of you to do is consider what's wildlife doing in your area. So maps, exploration. Now you have a new way to explore an area that you think you know. Discovery. Well, there's lots of stories that are hidden from your view. Finding your way. Well, if you're putting trail cameras out there, you're not necessarily going to be on trail. So you're going to have a new way of finding your way around a piece of property. And trepidation, I don't think so. I think it's more like investigation. So you don't have to be in a remote place to find these happenings. These can actually happen in your own backyards. And the other thing, the last two things that I want to show you, is there are other sites online. Once we get done, I will actually copy this and put this into the chat, these locations. And so some of these are articles describing how people are using trail cameras on conservation land or for Wyoming game and fish. They're actually using it for studying certain species and how mule deer and pronghorn antelope are migrating. For these two, these are also videos like ours. They have 1 year, but they go on for about 14 to 18 minutes. They're really interesting, but just be aware of that. So with that, who knows what you're going to see? We have seen everything from moose to monarch. And with that, I'd like to thank all of you for your attention, and I will get those connections and throw them into the chat for you.
And actually, Eric, we could send those links out in our follow-up thank you email that everybody gets after
Yes,
the presentation.
that would be great.
Yeah. So if Rebecca can grab those,
Yep.
that'd be great. Wonderful. Wow. Well, thank you, Eric. This has been wonderful. I really like to hear your combination of the videography kind of piece and the data accumulation. This is just amazing. I really enjoyed that talk. And Rebecca, how are we doing for questions?
All right, we have a couple. Let's start with this one from Marcia, which was a question that I was also curious about. What's the most interesting thing that you've learned from this project? I would add maybe the most interesting animal that you've seen.
It depends on when during the project you catch me. When we saw our first moose, I was ecstatic. When we saw our first porcupine, I was ecstatic. When we saw our first fisher, I was ecstatic. But I think sometimes it's not just an animal sighting, it's the behavior that gets me. I just had some footage that I downloaded this past week, and it's of a chipmunk and a hermit thrush. And you say, big deal. Except the chipmunk is defending its territory, and it's really getting agitated that the hermit thrush is sitting on the rock, and you can just hear it vocalizing, and finally it rushes at the hermit thrush. That's exciting. So it's almost catch me on the day, whatever day of the week it is, and I'll have something new that has been found. I will give you a kind of a teaser. One of the other things that was really exciting is we've gotten sometimes where predators have caught prey on camera. So we've got a barred owl catching a wood frog in the middle of the spring when the vernal pools and when the frogs are breeding. And I also have footage that I'm going to be putting up for a question of a broadwing hawk that has caught prey. And I'm going to ask people to identify the prey. So I'm not going to tell you what it is, but it has caught prey and then flies off with it. So all those kinds of things just make it really, really exciting. And as you can tell, you know, the more I think about it, the more animated I become.
That's so cool. Thank you, Eric. All right, let's see. Next question from Adam. Is there any evidence or reported sightings of mountain lions in New Hampshire in the area in particular?
We don't have any evidence. How's that? You will have some people that have called us that have said they have seen mountain lion or they have evidence of mountain lion. And usually what we ask them to do is to go ahead and get in contact with Fish and Game to verify that it is a mountain lion. And then when we follow up with Fish and Game, they will say that they have not found any verified images that are from New Hampshire. Some people will Photoshop images one on top of another, but by looking at the vegetation in the background, they're saying, that's not New Hampshire. That's out west. So there's nothing that's confirmed here. And the other one that everybody always asks me about is if we've seen any Bigfoot sightings, and we haven't seen any of those either.
It's funny. Good to know. Let's see. I guess maybe another interesting comment question maybe you can answer. So one of our attendees tonight lives in North Manchester in one of 2 apartment buildings along the Merrimack. There are no forests and woods, but in late fall, they had 7 turkeys strolled through across the strip of lawn between the patio and the car. And this person is 74 and has never seen a turkey in town. What's up? Overpopulation, COVID-19? Can you answer that?
These are all really good questions people are asking. One of the things that you're going to have happen is you will have seasonal variation, first off, in population. So if the population is high, you're going to have the young disperse over a greater area because of the fact they're looking for their own territory. Or if they're part of a flock, the flock, you know, after a while can only hold so many birds and somebody's got to move somewhere else. The other thing that you want to consider is you want to consider food availability. If it's last year is a poor mast year, meaning that there's a low amount of acorns or beech nut or other seeds or nuts, that's going to mean turkey are going to, and other animals are going to disperse over a larger area. Think several years ago when we had, you know, what everybody was calling the squirrel apocalypse. And what you had there was you had a very high population of squirrels and kind of an average year, if I remember correctly, of mass that was produced. So you had more squirrels looking for somewhat of a limited food source. So they traveled a a much further distance. That may be the case of what might be happening with the turkeys. That would probably be something that I would definitely refer to the turkey biologist for Fish and Game. They would probably have a more clear idea of what might be happening there.
That's so cool. Turkeys are, I love seeing them, and I felt like I saw a lot of chicks last year, so that's really cool.
Yeah.
Right. I think that looks like the last of our questions. We have some nice comments. Great job, Eric, from Eileen. And I think we are set. Oh, wait a minute, got another one. Okay, last question maybe. Current New Hampshire moose and bear population in Vermont and Maine. Can you have any idea about that?
I'd have to do, I don't even want to throw out numbers because I'm uncertain that my numbers are up to date. So I know that the population of black bear is something that Fish and Game is trying to maintain. Gosh, I'm thinking it's somewhere in the neighborhood under 5,000 bear, but again, I would want to double check on that. For the moose population, both in New Hampshire and Vermont, and to some extent in Maine, our moose populations are being impacted by climate change, and particularly with the warmer winters, these are animals that get ticks on their body. It's called winter tick. And unfortunately, if you're a young calf or a yearling, the ticks, if there's 20,000 ticks on the body of a yearling compared to an adult, they're going to be taking a lot more blood out of that yearling. And the population of animals drops because they do not survive through the winter, because they're just not able to handle that blood loss. But also the warming climate, particularly like on a day like today, I'm in my office here and I'm sweating, but a moose can't sweat. So any temperature above like 70 degrees is considered hot for them. And for that animal, they're going to be going to a large body of water, a pond or a lake or whatever to cool off in. It's also a great place to be feeding on vegetation for antler growth or for minerals for milk for young. But the animals may also be rolling in mud, in wallows for trying to cool off. And then they may seek higher elevation. So for us, we think the heat stress right now is pretty bad, but for a moose, it's actually probably more so. Because they can't sweat and they've got fur on, they've got to find a way to try to cool off. But good questions, and I'm sorry I can't give you hard, fast numbers. Again, that's something that I would go right to Fish and Game to find, and the Vermont equivalent of Fish and Game as well.
Thank you, Eric. I'll see if maybe I can find a link for that to send out in tomorrow's thank you email.
Or if you, well, I was going to say, if you want, I can try to go ahead and do that and send that to you before I leave tonight.
Sure, that would be fantastic.
Okay.
Only if you want to.
Hey, I'm here.
All right.
Are we good? Are other questions or no?
I think we are all set.
All set. I just wanted to point out to everybody that you can come and see a portion of the hidden stories at the museum as part of our exhibit. For wayfinding. We're really glad that Eric put together a piece of this for us for you to enjoy at the museum. And of course, going to see the whole exhibit, this display at Squam Lake's Natural Science Center would be a wonderful thing to do, especially this time of year. So I want to thank you, Eric. Thank you so much for your wonderful presentation this evening. And thank you all for coming.